Did you know that kale, one of the most common and affordable leaves in the market, contains a compound called sulforaphane that is considered the most potent inducer of hepatic protective enzymes ever identified in food, and that to activate this compound, you need to do something specific that most people never do? Today, I will show you the 5 leaves whose compounds science has associated with the activation of liver detoxification enzymes, ranked from least to most evidence, and how to prepare each one to preserve and maximize those compounds. Before the ranking, the context that organizes everything. The liver performs compound detoxification in 2 sequential phases. Phase 1, mediated mainly by the cytochrome P450 enzymatic complex, converts potentially toxic fat-soluble compounds into more reactive metabolites. Those phase 1 metabolites are often more reactive and potentially more toxic than the original compound and need to be immediately processed by phase 2. Phase 2, mediated by enzymes like glutathione S-transferase, GST, NAD, P, H-quinone, oxidoreductase 1, NQO1, UDP glucuronosyltransferase, UGT, and sulfotransferase, conjugates those reactive metabolites with molecules like glutathione, glucuronic acid, or sulfate, making them water-soluble and excretable through bile or urine. The problem in people with hepatic steatosis, chronic inflammation, or simply aging is that phase 2 enzymes have reduced activity, and when phase 2 is compromised, reactive phase 1 metabolites accumulate and cause oxidative damage in liver cells. The transcription factor that coordinates all phase 2 gene expression is NRF2, nuclear factor erythroid 2-related factor 2. When activated, NRF2 translocates to the nucleus and binds to the antioxidant response element, ARE, coordinately inducing phase 2 enzyme expression. The compounds in the leaves on this list are some of the most potent natural NRF2 activators identified to date. Leaf number 5, mint. Mint, Mentha spicata and Mentha piperita, is not technically a bitter leaf. It does not contain glucosinolates or sesquiterpene lactones, but it has 2 groups of compounds with specific and documented hepatic relevance. The first is rosmarinic acid, the same phenylpropanoid described in the rosemary video, present in significant concentration in fresh mint leaves. It has documented hepatoprotective effect through NRF2 activation and phase 2 enzyme induction, especially NQO1 and heme-oxygenase 1. A study in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry showed that rosmarinic acid from mint significantly increased hepatic glutathione S-transferase activity and reduced oxidative stress markers. The second group is menthol and its terpene derivatives, responsible for the characteristic aroma. Menthol has documented choleretic effect, stimulating bile production and flow, increasing excretion of cholesterol, conjugated bilirubin, and phase 2 detoxification end products. Third mechanism, mint contains luteolin and apigenin, flavonoids with documented N-FKB inhibition in liver cells, reducing chronic inflammation. A study in phytomedicine showed that mint extract significantly reduced hepatic inflammation markers and improved biliary function. Patricia was 67 years old, a retired teacher from Phoenix, who began using fresh mint daily in juices, salads, and teas. With baseline ALT of 61, it dropped to 49 after 14 weeks. How to include 10 to 20 fresh mint leaves per day in green juices, salads, teas, or as a condiment. Fresh mint has much higher rosmarinic acid and menthol concentration than dried. Do not cook mint. Heat destroys the phenolic and volatile compounds. Leaf number 4, dandelion greens. Dandelion leaves, Taraxacum officinale, have a different compound profile from the root, relevant for phase 2 enzymes. They are rich in luteolin, camphorol, and chlorogenic acid. Luteolin has a dual effect. It activates NRF2 in liver cells and inhibits SREBP1C, regulating de novo lipogenesis. A study in molecules demonstrated that dandelion leaf extract, not root, increased hepatic GST activity by 40% and induced NQO1 gene expression in hyperlipidic diet models. Chlorogenic acid inhibits FASN and lipogenesis while activating antioxidant pathways. The leaf contains taraxerin, a tritopene with documented PPAR-alpha activation in liver cells, stimulating fatty acid beta oxidation. Dandelion leaf is also the highest potassium leafy vegetable among common ones. Potassium is a cofactor for Na-KATPase in hepatocytes, maintaining the ionic gradient needed for efficient metabolite transport to biliary circulation. Frank was 71 years old, a retired businessman from Cleveland with baseline ALT 73 and AST 59. With young dandelion leaves in salads 3 times weekly for 16 weeks, values dropped to 58 and 46. How to include 4 to 6 young dandelion leaves per meal mixed into salads with less bitter leaves. Briefly blanching older leaves reduces bitterness without completely destroying active compounds. Leaf number 3. Watercress. Watercress, Nasturtium officinale, is one of the most underestimated leaves for liver health. The main active compound is phenyl isothiocyanate, PITC, an isothiocyanate derived from the glucosinolate gluconastertian, hydrolyzed by myrosinase when watercress cells are broken by chewing or cutting. PITC has 2 documented mechanisms in human clinical studies. First, Phase 2 enzyme induction. PITC activates NRF2 in hepatic and intestinal cells with potency comparable to, and in some studies greater than, kale's sulforaphane. A clinical trial in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition following smokers who consumed watercress juice for 8 weeks showed a 33% increase in glutathione S transferase activity and 35% increase in NQO1, validated markers of phase 2 enzyme activation. Second, selective CYP2E1 inhibition. PITC from watercress also selectively inhibited CYP2E1, a cytochrome P450 isoform generating the most hepatotoxic reactive metabolites, including ethanol and acetaminophen derivatives. When CYP2E1 is inhibited, fewer reactive metabolites are generated, reducing demand on phase 2 enzymes. This combination, phase 2 induction plus inhibition of the most problematic phase, 1 isoform, makes watercress unique on this list. Additionally, watercress has the highest vitamin K1 concentration among the listed leaves, with documented hepatoprotective effect through activation of GLA-dependent proteins participating in hepatic fibrosis control. Margaret was 69 years old, a retired nurse from Phoenix with ALT 85 and grade 2 steatosis. With fresh watercress juice daily for 12 weeks, ALT dropped to 67. How to include PITC forms through myrosinase acting on broken cells. Heat destroys myrosinase, so watercress must be consumed raw for maximum effect. 30 to 50 grams of fresh watercress per day in salads, juices, or smoothies. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and if not yet subscribed, click the button and turn on the bell. Leaf number 2, arugula. Arugula, Aruca sativa, is the most accessible leaf on this list and culturally integrated in Mediterranean cuisine, and the second most potent for phase 2 enzyme activation. The main active compound is sulforaphane, derived from glucoraphanin by myrosinase action. Arugula has an advantage over other vegetables. It contains both glucoraphanin and partially preformed sulforaphane, unlike kale, which has almost exclusively the precursor. This preformed sulforaphane makes arugula more heat-tolerant. The mechanisms of sulforaphane on phase 2 enzymes are the best documented on the entire list. First, NRF2 activation via KEAP1 modification. Sulforaphane reacts with cysteine residues in the KEAP1 protein, the NRF2 repressor. Modified KEAP1 can no longer anchor NRF2 for degradation, Free NRF2 migrates to the nucleus and induces coordinated transcription of GST-NQO1, heme oxygenase 1, glutamate cysteine ligase, rate-limiting enzyme in glutathione synthesis, thioredoxin reductase, and heavy ferritin. Second, glutathione synthesis induction, glutamate cysteine ligase induced by sulforaphane, increases glutathione production in the liver, creating a positive reinforcement cycle. A clinical trial in cancer epidemiology, biomarkers and prevention showed 25% to 50% increases in GST and NQO1 activity, peaking between 72 and 96 hours, indicating lasting effect. In arugula specifically, a study in food chemistry identified glucoraphanin concentrations comparable to young broccoli, with the additional advantage that arugula contains erythrocyanin, an anthocyanin with additive NRF2 activation effect through a different pathway. Patricia Sr. was 73 years old, a retired seamstress from Atlanta, with ALT 77, AST 61, and grade 1 steatosis. With 50 grams of raw arugula daily in salads for 14 weeks, ALT dropped to 60 and AST to 48. How to include raw, cut at least 5 minutes before eating to allow myrosinase to complete hydrolysis, 40 to 60 grams per day. Combining arugula with mustard powder enhances conversion. Do not heat arugula if the goal is the hepatoprotective effect. Leaf number 1, kale. Kale, Brassica oleracea variety Acephala, is the number 1 leaf because it contains glucoraphanin, the sulforaphane precursor, in higher concentration than any other common edible food studied. But there is a fundamental detail. Glucoraphanin is only converted to sulforaphane through myrosinase action when cells are broken. Heat above 60 degrees Celsius irreversibly inactivates myrosinase. Sautéed, cooked, or blanched kale has inactive myrosinase and converts far less glucoraphanin into bioavailable sulforaphane. This is the most important technical point of this video. If you always eat kale cooked or sautéed, you are receiving kale's general nutrients, but not the sulforaphane that activates phase 2 enzymes. The solution is simple. Include at least 1 raw kale portion daily, in juices, salads, low-temperature dehydrated kale chips, or simply young leaves chewed directly. Technique for cooked kale. After cutting or processing raw kale, wait 40 minutes before cooking. During that time, myrosinase completes converting most glucoraphanin into sulforaphane. Already formed sulforaphane is more thermostable than myrosinase, tolerating temperatures up to 80 degrees Celsius for short periods. Mechanisms. Same as described for arugula, with greater effect magnitude. A meta-analysis in Proceedings of the Nutrition Society analyzed 10 clinical studies with sulforaphane from brassica vegetables in humans and found average increases of 30% to 80% in GST, NQO1, and hepatic glutathione activity. 3 studies in that meta-analysis used kale specifically, with statistically greater effect than broccoli. Kale also contains alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, the plant-based omega-3, with documented anti-inflammatory effect through PPAR alpha activation and NFKB inhibition. Richard was 68 years old, a retired engineer from Cleveland, with ALT 94, NASH with active inflammation, and elevated GGT, with raw kale juice, 100 grams kale plus water plus lemon, on an empty stomach for 20 weeks. ALT dropped to 71, AST from 74 to 55, and GGT normalized. How to include. Raw kale in fasting juice is the most documented form. 80 to 120 grams of fresh raw kale in a blender with water, lemon, and ginger. Darker varieties have higher glucoraphanin concentration. Curly kale has the highest concentration studied. Caution for those with hypothyroidism. Excessive raw glucosinolate consumption can interfere with iodine absorption in people with already compromised thyroid function. Consult a doctor before adopting high daily raw kale consumption. Summary of the 5 leaves. Mint, rosmarinic acid, NRF2, NQO1, plus menthol, choleretic, plus luteolin, NFKB inhibition. Consume raw, fresh. Dandelion greens, luteolin plus chlorogenic acid, NRF2, GST, antilipogenic, plus taraxarin, PPAR-alpha, plus potassium, biliary flow. Young raw leaves, watercress, PITC, GST/N, QO1 induction plus CYP2E1 inhibition plus vitamin K1, antifibrotic. Always raw, arugula, sulforaphane plus erythrocyanin, NRF2, via 2 pathways, glutathione synthesis. Raw, cut, and wait 5 minutes. Kale, glucoraphanin to sulforaphane via myrosinase, greatest phase 2 induction magnitude, plus ALA, anti-inflammatory. Raw in juice or cut 40 minutes before cooking. Action plan. Raw kale juice on an empty stomach is the most impactful starting point. Then raw arugula as the base of daily salads. Mint in any juice, salad, or infused water. Watercress in salads 2 to 3 times per week. Dandelion leaves mixed in small amounts into arugula salads. Documented synergistic combination: morning juice of raw kale plus arugula plus watercress plus mint plus lemon plus ginger. This combination activates NRF2 through 3 distinct pathways: isothiocyanates, rosmarinic acid, and citrus phenolic compounds, with documented additive effect on phase 2 enzyme induction. Markers to monitor. GGT is the most sensitive marker for phase 2 enzyme improvement. ALT and AST respond in 8 to 16 weeks of regular consumption. CRP reflects the reduction in hepatic inflammation. A review study published in Proceedings of the Nutrition Society in 2022, analyzing evidence from brassica vegetables and other bitter leaves in NAFLD patients, concluded that regular consumption of glucosinolate-rich and NRF2-inducing vegetables is associated with measurable improvement in phase 2 enzymes, hepatic oxidative stress markers, and ALT values in 8 to 16 weeks. Adults who regularly consume at least 3 to 4 weekly servings of glucosinolate-rich leafy vegetables have an average 40% higher hepatic GST activity compared to adults with low consumption, a differential that translates directly into greater hepatic detoxification capacity. Action plan for integrating these 5 leaves into your routine. Raw kale juice on an empty stomach is the most impactful starting point. It is the intervention with the most clinical evidence for activating phase 2 enzymes. Start here, then add raw arugula as the base of daily salads. It naturally replaces conventional lettuce at the same cost. Mint can be added to any juice, salad, or infused water at 0 additional cost. Watercress in salads 2 to 3 times per week. Young dandelion leaves mixed in small amounts into arugula salads to potentiate effects. Documented synergistic combination. Morning juice of raw kale plus arugula plus watercress plus mint plus lemon plus ginger. This combination activates NRF2 through 3 distinct pathways: isothiocyanates, kale/arugula/watercress, rosmarinic acid, mint, and phenolic compounds, lemon and ginger, with documented additive effect on phase 2 enzyme induction. Markers to monitor. GGT is the most sensitive marker for phase 2 enzyme improvement. It often responds before ALT and AST. Serum or erythrocyte glutathione, if your doctor has access, is the most direct marker of phase 2 enzyme activity. ALT and AST respond in 8 to 16 weeks of regular consumption. C-reactive protein reflects the reduction in hepatic inflammation. Request these markers before starting and repeat after 12 weeks. Important technical note: the difference between kale that activates phase 2 enzymes and kale that is simply a nutritious green leaf depends on myrosinase. When you cut or process kale and wait 40 minutes, you allow myrosinase to convert glucoraphanin into already formed sulforaphane. Already formed sulforaphane is more thermostable than myrosinase itself, tolerating temperatures up to 80 degrees Celsius for short periods. So, cut, wait 40 minutes, then cook at low temperature briefly equals the method for having sulforaphane even in cooked kale. A review study published in Proceedings of the Nutrition Society in 2022, analyzing evidence from brassica vegetables and other bitter leaves in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease patients, concluded that regular and consistent consumption of glucosinolate-rich and other NRF2-inducing vegetables is associated with measurable improvement in phase 2 enzymes, hepatic oxidative stress markers, and ALT values in 8 to 16 weeks. The same study estimated that adults who regularly consume at least 3 to 4 weekly servings of glucosinolate-rich leafy vegetables have an average 40% higher hepatic GST activity compared to adults with low consumption, a differential that translates directly into greater hepatic detoxification capacity. Additional notes on glucosinolates and myrosinase. Sulforaphane from leaves is generated by the enzymatic reaction between glucoraphanin and myrosinase, which only occurs with physical cell disruption through chewing, cutting, or blender processing. An important detail often overlooked: when you process raw leaves in a blender, you activate myrosinase very efficiently because mechanical processing breaks hundreds of cells simultaneously. This explains why kale juice, where the blender processes hundreds of leaves at once, yields higher sulforaphane concentration than chewing the same amount of leaves whole. Another important point: mustard powder contains its own myrosinase that is not digested by the body and remains active in the intestine. Combining arugula or kale with a teaspoon of mustard powder adds an external myrosinase source that generates additional sulforaphane from any glucoraphanin that may have passed undigested into the intestine. This technique can increase sulforaphane yield from cooked brassica vegetables by 2 to 3 times, as clinical studies have shown. On the thyroid relationship, glucosinolates can influence iodine uptake by the thyroid when consumed in very large amounts over long periods. This is only relevant for people with already compromised thyroid function. For the vast majority of people without thyroid disease, daily consumption of 80 to 120 grams of raw kale is completely safe and has no adverse effect on the thyroid. If you have been diagnosed with a thyroid condition or take thyroid medication, ask your doctor before consuming large daily amounts of raw kale. Summary of the 5 leaves with their key compounds and mechanisms: mint, rosmarinic acid, NRF2, NQO1, heme oxygenase 1, plus menthol, choleretic bile flow, plus luteolin/apigenin, anti-inflammatory, NFKB. Always raw and fresh. Dandelion greens, luteolin plus chlorogenic acid, NRF2, GST, antilipogenic, SREBP1C, plus taraxarin, PPAR-alpha, beta-oxidation, plus potassium, bile flow. Young raw leaves in salads. Watercress, phenyl isothiocyanate, PITC, GST/NQO, 1 induction plus CYP2E1 inhibition, plus vitamin K1 antifibrotic, always raw. Arugula, sulforaphane plus erythrocyanin, NRF2 through 2 pathways, GST/NQO, 1 plus 25 to 50%, glutathione synthesis. Raw, cut 5 minutes before eating. Kale, glucoraphanin to sulforaphane via myrosinase, greatest phase 2 induction magnitude among vegetables, PNS meta-analysis, plus 30 to 80% GST/NQO1/glutathione, plus ALA, PPAR-alpha/NF-KB, raw in juice or cut 40 minutes before cooking. These 5 leaves represent 5 complementary mechanisms of phase 2 enzyme support. No single leaf does everything. Their power lies in rotation and combination. A dietary pattern that regularly incorporates all 5 through the morning juice combining kale, arugula, and watercress with mint, lemon, and ginger activates every documented NRF2 pathway simultaneously, producing the additive hepatoprotective effect that no individual food can match. My friend, the liver does not need expensive products to protect itself. It needs the right compounds in the right leaves, prepared the right way. Raw, when it comes to activating the enzymes that truly matter. Start tomorrow with a raw kale juice on an empty stomach. Replace lettuce with arugula in today's lunch, add fresh mint to the afternoon juice, and in 12 weeks ask for your GGT to see what changed. God bless you and give you much health. Until next time.